Well, as we come into the last week of 2013, I was musing over this past week of how the world is in such a state of turmoil. Country after country is unstable, and this instability is pouring out across the entire globe, everywhere perhaps except for the Western Hemisphere. There are problems here, of course, but if you look into Africa, you look into the Middle East, go across into the subcontinent and down into Southeast Asia, it's all in a state of turmoil. Libya, Egypt, the Central African states, the Gaza, Israel, Turkey, Lebanon, Syria. Iran is about the only one that isn't unstable. Iraq, the former southeast area of the former USSR, into Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, down through Cambodia, Thailand, etc. It's all in turmoil. And regrettably, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of it, if not most of it, is due to the policies of our own State Department, the various things that we do. And it doesn't matter what paper you read, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, you name it, the pages are full of these things. Most interesting, however, was yesterday's New York Sunday Times. And it starts off with an article on the front page right here on Benghazi. And it's obvious that they're trying to convince us of something in regard to that. And you go into the inside. Now, this is the article on the front page right here. It's continued on the inside. This is the whole continuation of the article. 2 full pages. And then a third full page to convince us that Benghazi is something that came about as a result of a video calling into question the holiness of Muhammad and that sort of thing. They never once get into debating whether or not, or even talking about the fact that our own government, our ambassador at Benghazi, was supplying arms to rebel factions, and that other rebel factions didn't like this, and therefore attacked Benghazi. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes, trying to get information out as to who knew what, when, how, etc. Fox News particularly is doing this. And I think that this is a tactic by the New York Times, that's my belief, to try and put oil on troubled waters so that people just think, oh, it was that video, that thing that was done in somebody's basement in LA somewhere. That caused this tremendous thing to blow up in Benghazi. When in fact, some of the things that our own State Department was doing had a lot to do with the reaction that came about. Not to excuse the killing of Americans, don't get me wrong. But sometimes the innocent individuals in our in our State Department and our Foreign Affairs Office kind of suffer for what the people at the top do and have as a policy. This has been going on far more than Americans realize since the days of the Pierce administration. It accelerated slightly under Buchanan. It accelerated tremendously under Lincoln. Now, I'm going to make a statement here that I can back up, but it takes a long time to do it. I've written a book about that thick to back it up. I've not published it yet. But under Lincoln, we appointed an awful lot of communists to represent the United States as our consulates, our ambassadors, and other charge affairs and that sort of thing around Europe, who were communists, who fled those countries, came to the United States, and we sent them back to represent the United States. Some of them had prices on their heads from their governments, but they couldn't touch them because they were, they had diplomatic immunity. I don't want to digress any further than that because it's a very long subject, And to get involved in any of the examples would take quite a bit of time. But we've had a problem in the U.S. State Department ever since then, with varying degrees. It rose up again during the McCarthy era, when McCarthy was trying to say, we've got communists in the State Department. Well, of course we did. But it was an argument over how many. And can you prove it? You know, nobody ever sued McCarthy for calling him a communist when he wasn't. McCarthy never called anybody a communist that wasn't a communist. And everybody thinks it had something to do with Hollywood. McCarthy had nothing to do with the Hollywood 10, for instance. He never investigated Hollywood. That was done by the House of Representatives. He was a U.S. Senator. Also, you don't think about, well, why was McCarthy reelected if he was such a really rotten guy? The people loved him. Very popular man in his day. It's just been the history books that have made him into the ogre that he's become, using the term McCarthyism. But if you look at it, investigate it, and really study it, not just take the superficial, but study it, you will discover that McCarthy had something that he knew about the State Department, and he was trying to get people under the discipline of Russia, our enemy, as members of the Communist Party out of our foreign service. That's simple. And it's pretty, actually it's pretty logical, isn't it? I mean, if we were going to have war, let's say, with China, would we want to have the Chinese come in? Well, on that regard, why would we want, for instance, when the Egyptians have outlawed the Egyptian Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, why is it that our own government here in the United States, the Obama administration specifically, has 5 people in the White House that are part of the Egyptian Brotherhood that work in the security apparatus of the United States? Does that make sense? And we see that sort of thing constantly within our State Department. And even Americans who may not have come from the United States, but outside the United States, but born here, belonging to organizations whose goal it is to eliminate the United States, such as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Transatlantic Policy Network, and other organizations of that ilk, whose job it is, whose goal it is, to eliminate the United States through merger with the UN, with the European Union, and that sort of thing. These are the people who are running our State Department today. And these people who are moving towards socialism in the United States are also promoting socialism overseas in our foreign policy. They're the same people. The same people that want to get rid of God out of the schools and off the public, out of the public eye and off all the public buildings are the same people involved in our foreign policy. And yet we can't seem to understand this as Americans. We think that our domestic policy is one thing and our foreign policy is another. Not if they're run by the same people. If they are trying to move us towards an anti-God country, towards socialism inside the United States, what do you think that they're doing overseas? And they're meddling in areas that is causing a tremendous problem. We supposedly have solved the problem in Afghanistan, and yet opium production is the highest it's ever been. And our rockets are even raining down on our embassy in Kabul last week. We supposedly solved the problem in Iraq. We're now sending them missiles to attack their own people inside Iraq who've risen up in opposition to the Iraqi government, which, by the way, now is a friend of Iran. And we could go on and on and on with this sort of thing because of the meddling of our State Department, which is run by people who have a much different agenda than the American citizen. And it's time we start noticing that and not being whipped into feelings about those guys are dirty guys and these guys are dirty guys because they attack us. If I lived there and I saw a foreign policy implemented by the United States that was detrimental not only to me as a foreign citizen, but the American people as well, I suppose I'd be a little bit upset myself. Basically what I'm saying is, take a look at the whole pattern across the globe as to what we are doing and the reaction to what we are doing and how it's unsettling the countries all over. Basic line is this: our foreign policy is very foreign. Until next week, we'll see you then.